From disruption to delivery, keeping clinical trials moving and navigating supply chain disruptions in uncertain times. Welcome to Oximio Voices, Oximio's podcast series where we take a look behind the scenes at the logistics and supply chain challenges often encountered in conducting clinical trials. In today's episode, we're diving into a critical topic, the growing impact of geopolitical instability on clinical trial supply chains. In 2026, we're seeing increasing disruption to global logistics networks. Air cargo routes are changing, transit hubs are under pressure, and for clinical trials, that creates real challenges, not just operationally, but for patients relying on timely access to investigational medicines. For sponsors and CROs, this isn't just about delays, it's about maintaining cold chain integrity, ensuring regulatory compliance, and ultimately protecting patient outcomes and trial continuity. Joining me today is Zayheda Khan, Oximio's Chief Commercial Officer and UK Managing Director. Today we'll explore what's happening on the ground. What does all this disruption mean for clinical trials, and what can be done to ensure continuity, protect timelines, and most importantly, ensure patients continue to receive the treatments they need. Welcome, Zayheda, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alison. It's great to be here, and obviously a really important conversation and topic for the industry right now. So looking forward to this session with you.
Absolutely, thank you. Let's start with the big picture, Zayheda. Can you set the scene about the Middle East market and its importance within clinical research?
Of course, thank you for the question. The Middle East is an emerging market for clinical research. It does provide an alternative to historically dominated regions such as North America, Western Europe, who, due to the rising operational costs, increasing regulatory pressures, and the need for a broader patient diversity, are making CROs and sponsors expand their clinical trial activities in other regions, such as the Middle East. The Middle East does offer a modern healthcare infrastructure, world-class medical facilities, supportive governments, improving regulatory frameworks, and growing pharmaceutical markets, not forgetting it's also strategic geographical positioning in the region. It also can serve as a gateway across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The clinical trial market in the region is valued at around $650 million and is projected to reach around 1.1 to 1.16 billion by 2033. So there's a vast trajectory of growth in the region.
Yes, absolutely. It's playing a significant role in overall global healthcare. And tell me, Zayheda, what are the most significant supply chain disruptions affecting clinical trials right now?
Well, I think we are all seeing, but us in particular at Oximio, we're seeing a combination of geopolitical tensions impacting key logistics corridors, particularly the air freight routes. We hear a lot about air sort of spaces being closed or even rediverted. So therefore, many clinical trial supply chains rely heavily on predictable transit times through established transit hubs. And when these are disrupted or rerouted, it can cause delays and can bring huge amounts of uncertainty. This in turn creates increased congestion in alternative hubs and in some cases reduced flight frequency, which makes planning much more complex. As we all know, clinical trials are extremely time sensitive, not only the trials themselves, but also the products that we have to deliver. Yeah. So this is when logistics can become unpredictable. It can affect everything from the delivery of lab kits to diagnostic materials. Even the smallest delay can cause a ripple effect across clinical trial timelines.
Yes, absolutely. And are traditional supply chain models struggling to cope with this?
They are, and in particularly centralised models where they rely on a single depot or a limited number of transit routes. They're less flexible in responding to disruption. And we are starting to see a shift towards more decentralised trials and decentralised depot models, and then being regionally more adaptive in logistics.
Yes, And so can we talk more about that particular impact? What does a delay in investigational product delivery actually mean at the patient level, Zayheda?
It can be very concerning. Delays can mean missed dosing windows, postponement of treatment cycles for patients, or even in a worst case scenario, even withdrawal of a patient from a clinical trial, which could almost be disastrous to the outcomes. Supply
Mhm.
chain reliability isn't just an operational issue, it's directly tied to patient outcomes. Delays in IMPs, for example, lab kits, medical devices, medical equipment, has the potential to slow down site activity,
Mhm.
patient assessments, and also trial progression in general. This is also even more critical when we look at cold chain products and handling of cold chain, whether it's medicinal products across the logistics framework. And it is much more complex. Many modern therapies, for example, biologics and cell and gene therapy, are highly temperature sensitive. And what this means that any disruptions increase the risk of temperature excursions, which can compromise the products and obviously lead to then wastage and even cancellation of treatment. And in those type of circumstances, there are no second chances in some clinical trial frameworks, especially when it comes to cell and gene therapy. There is only one chance in some occasions, and that's why it's very critical that the assessment of that is made.
Yes, no, I understand that. And how would you say this is affecting patient retention then?
Mm. This is also a concern. There are many concerns, but this is obviously another major one.
Mhm.
If patients can experience delays or inconsistencies in treatment, it can also affect the trust and engagement, which ultimately impacts on patient retention, and therefore the outcomes of the trial can be impacted. And
Mhm.
importantly, not to forget the vital treatments that are required by patients sometimes won't actually occur. So not only the dropout rate actually
Mhm.
increases, but the retention of those patients will actually be more and more difficult to handle as the trial goes forward.
Yes, and of course, all this must lead to cost pressures. How are sponsors balancing rising costs with the need to maintain trial continuity?
Absolutely. Costs are definitely
Mhm.
increasing. And I think we see that not only in the Middle East, but right across the world.
Yeah.
So these increased costs from whether it's rerouting, additional handling, and the additional commodities that may actually need to be added into the scenarios, all add additional complexities, not only to
Mhm.
budgets, but also the potential delays to the clinical trial in terms of obtaining additional materials that were required in one region which may not be available, and then you have to source in other regions, which actually could have a knock-on delay as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Sponsors are now having to prioritize time, reliability over cost, which can diminish quality. And this is against the
Mhm.
ethos of Oximio. Having quality at the foundation of everything we do, it's not something that we can compromise on.
No, absolutely. So really, we're looking at a resilient supply chain. Tell me, what does this look like?
It's all about flexibility, tailor made solutions, personalized approaches. Sponsors need multiple options, alternative routes, a regional infrastructure, and the ability to adapt quickly and provide agile solution when disruption actually sets in. This is where, like I mentioned earlier, a decentralized model can play a key role. It reduces reliance on a single central depot, but by using regional depots, which may be closer to other trial sites, this can help shorten transit times and reduce the exposure to global disruptions.
Mhm.
The importance here is finding a good regional partner and also a global partner who also understands that regional setup.
Yeah.
Regional partners can bring in together their local expertise, and this together with the regulatory knowledge, knowing how to navigate importation processes or even last mile delivery can make a huge difference in maintaining continuity.
Yes. And talking of continuity, Zayeda, would you say that contingency planning is now a must-have rather than a nice to have?
Absolutely. I think it goes without saying in our day and age, it's an absolute definite approach and a mindset that we need to have. In today's
Mhm.
environment, proactive planning is essential. Waiting while a disruption happens is not a
Mhm.
viable option. So we have to mitigate risks in advance. Ensuring that your provider has a strong BCP strategy, for example, in place is important to overcome such disruptions. And it is also becoming more and more essential.
Yes, no, I fully understand that. Can we talk about Oximio now and Oximio's own experience and practical solutions? How is the company helping sponsors navigate these challenges?
Absolutely, and I'm going to talk about from our experience perspective here.
Mhm.
So at Oximio, we focus on providing flexible, regionally up to optimized solutions that can reduce both time and risk. And also, as I've mentioned earlier, one of Oximio's value propositions is to utilize another regional depot model. So this allows the inventory to be positioned either closer to where it's needed rather than relying on a central hub location.
Mhm.
This again can enable a faster, more secure delivery to trial sites, minimizing the handling and reducing transit times, or a dependency on a longer or more complex shipping route.
Yeah.
The shipment consolidation is also another important strategy which can be assessed. Instead of more frequent, smaller shipments, larger consignments can be consolidated into a consolidated shipment, therefore reducing the burden of logistical supply disruptions. This consolidation approach can also include labeling conducted locally and then to navigate country specific regulatory requirements as well.
Yeah.
So, again, having a tailor made but more a personal and bespoke service is also the key here.
Yeah.
Another element that is also sometimes forgotten, and maybe even it's probably not that much of a consideration, is biosamples.
Hmm.
Again, the
Yeah.
importance of those. We can consolidate these at regional facilities before exporting them to the laboratories, no matter where they may be in the world, whether that's in Europe or the US or anywhere else, as I indicate, in the world. But the consolidation of those biosamples can ultimately balance cost and also
Hmm.
time. And in clinical trials, time is often the most important critical
Yeah.
factor. By providing a flexible, tailor-made solution,
Hmm.
it's important to actually support our clients with
Hmm.
reducing time and risk and keeping costs as low as possible in this unknown environment.
Yes, no, absolutely. So looking ahead, Zaida, do you see the current disruptions in the Middle East as temporary or part of a longer term shift?
Well, nobody wishes to see the current geopolitical disruption drag on, but it's important to have contingency in place
Mhm.
because we are facing a bit of an unknown.
Yeah.
Supply chains will always have some form of challenge. However, organizations such as our own Oximio are here to design and have agile ways of working,
Yeah.
but with resilience in mind right from the offset. Sponsors should be reassured and actually have a reassessment of their supply chain strategies with that reassurance from their important partner. They need to also build in flexibility, looking at diversifying routes and investing in regional infrastructure, and that is where Oximio can actually provide agile ways of working and provide support where it's necessary.
Yes, uh-huh. And what would you see, Zaida, is the biggest mindset change in clinical trial logistics today?
Well, it's a bit of a no-brainer as far as my mindset and I'm
Mhm.
concerned. We need to move away from being reactive to proactive planning. Organizations who will succeed are the ones who've actually created risk assessment strategies and assess the potential disruption in advance rather
Mhm.
than be faced with a difficult situation of the unknown.
Yeah.
We at Oximio have had experience of various BCP strategies and come out of created some situations and agile ways of working for some
Mhm.
difficult situations. So I think we do have some experience there that we can certainly support our sponsors with. That being said, Oximio has over 20
Mhm.
years plus of experience fulfilling supply chain requirements across the globe. So as I said, we've had our fair share of disruptions to handle and also manage, and we've managed successfully. We have depots globally across all regions with backup contingency plans in place across all our locations. And in the current climate, we're able to handle backup contingencies for the Middle
Yeah.
East utilizing our regional depots, such as individual depots in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, and in Israel. And of course, we monitor supply chains and the logistics route closely.
Mhm.
But that being said, we do what we do, and that is to support patients.
Yeah.
And we have to find a way of getting treatments and solutions to our patients, which is the focus of what we do, whether that's commercially or for clinical research. That is our target and that is our focus.
Yes, no, exactly. Thank you, Zayheda. Today's discussion really highlights how interconnected global events and clinical trial operations have become. While disruption may be unavoidable, how we respond makes all the difference. Thank you, Zayheda, so much for joining me today and for sharing your valuable insights.
Thank you, Alison. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we have continued discussions with our stakeholders and partners.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. And thanks to everyone else for listening. For further information on our global supply chain solutions supporting clinical trials, please visit our website at oximio.com. Meanwhile, stay tuned and we look forward to continuing our conversation in future podcasts. Bye-bye.